guys, it's Mike Shinoda. I'm going to take you through the Fort Minor Rising Tide album, track by track, to give you some insight into how the songs were made and some of the great stories that went on behind the scenes as I was making the album. This album basically started as an idea to get back to my roots in the type of music that I used to make before Linkin Park. Back then I was listening to things like Run DMC and Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Rakim, NWA, Boogie Down Productions, and a lot of that was sample based. They used to go back to old 70s, 60s rock and funk and blues records and sample those things. I wanted to make an album that had that feel, but instead of sampling from those old records, I made the samples myself by playing the instruments by hand. Anyway, here we go. Fort Minor, The Rising Tide. I produced and mixed every track, overseen by Jay-Z, and I had a lot of great friends on the record. Check it out. That was Remember the Name. That was one of those songs that, when I did it with Ryu and Tak from Styles of Beyond, I think that it was really just a good feeling to get back together with those guys. I've been friends with those guys for about 10 years, and this was one of, Remember the Name was one of those songs that when we did it together, it just felt natural. It felt like, friends getting together, hanging out, recording some music. And that's a good feeling. I think that's why the song came out the way it did. This next song is called Right Now. It's got Black Thought from The Roots, and Styles of Beyond is on this one as well. The song is basically inspired by a movie called Shortcuts. It's a film by Robert Altman. It's actually one of my favorite movies, and I just love the way in the movie what they had is basically say about 20 different characters whose lives just basically interact with each other, but they don't even know each other, and that's kind of been that was the theme for the song. Petrified was one of the last songs that got finished for the album. I think that I just wanted something that was kind of ridiculous and almost didn't have a point, that was real exciting and had a lot of energy to it. I thought that the rest of the album, had some really serious moments, and I wanted to do something that was the opposite, something that was just kind of crazy. When I first did my verse to Feel Like Home, I remember taking it to Jay, and this was the typical thing that would happen with the executive producer role. I'd send him a song and he'd listen to it and give me some feedback. Like on this song, for example, he said, I really like the beat, I like the hook, but the verses in general could be a little deeper. The verses that we had on there before were kind of like these, but they didn't go into specifics as much as these did. And so he said, you remember that movie Friday Night Lights where, everything was really heartfelt and it was real serious, and at the end of the story, there wasn't necessarily a happy ending for everybody. That's kind of, the reality of the situation with these stories. And I went back in and rewrote my verse to make it more specific. I added things like, the standing on the bridge and my grandfather's funeral and just holding a cup of coffee in my hand. Those little details seemed to make the story, jump out at me. And then when I played it for Jay, he said that, that it was ready for the record. The song Where'd You Go basically started as an idea of writing a song about being on the road, but from the perspective of the people that get left at home. I included two really great singers, Holly Brook and Jonah Matranga, on the song. After the album was released, I heard so many different versions of how people connected with the story, from the idea of having parents who were divorced to having siblings who were away, or having a loved one who was off as like a soldier in Iraq. These stories really touched me, and I think touched a lot of other people who were involved with the project, and that's kind of what we ended up doing the video about. Whenever you make a song that people connect with in a special way, that the song kind of becomes part of their experiences in their life, that's definitely one of the best feelings as an artist. I love the way that Where'd You Go transitions to In Stereo. You hear the dialogue from one of those meetings with me and Brad Delson and Jay-Z, where we were kind of reviewing the songs for the album, and Jay's comment about In Stereo was just that he first and foremost, he loved the beat. I wrote the song basically to talk about when I write a new song, no matter what it is, if it's something for Linkin Park, if it was a Fort Minor thing, the very first place that I play it outside the studio is in my car. If it works in the studio, that's one thing, because the studio has really expensive speakers, really expensive equipment, but in your car it's an entirely different sound, so you throw it in there, and if it's working there too, then it probably sounds alright. On this next song, Back Home, it was really great to get in the studio with Common. I had met him on a bunch of different occasions, and he's always just seemed to be a real nice guy. We always just seem to get along and have funny conversations and get off on weird subjects and all that. This beat, for some reason, just it wanted to have Common on it. I played him the song, and he's like, "Oh, let me get on that one." This next song, Cigarettes, was one of the first demos that I did for Fort Minor. I remember I was in the bus on a Linkin Park tour, and I was throwing together beats, just for fun. Like, I didn't have any intention of making a record, and the song Cigarettes kind of came together. I remember playing it for friends, and this is one of those songs everyone said, maybe you should put out a whole album. Eventually, one thing led to another, and I'm making the whole Fort Minor record, and I played this for Jay-Z, and he said it was just one of his favorite songs on the record, probably his favorite lyrics on the record. And I asked him, do you think it's weird that me, people see me as a person coming from Linkin Park, which is a rock band. Is it weird to have a song like this, which is obviously a kind of a commentary on where hip-hop's at right now? Being that we kind of know each other a little bit, he knows I was raised on hip-hop, and that's just the backbone of my musical, background or experience. And he said, if you love hip-hop the way that I know you do, then you're allowed to be critical of it. If it freaks people out, then let it do that to people. I don't dislike the gangster thing. I just felt like I could do a record without it. Back in 2003, I think it was, maybe 2004, we did a tour called Project Revolution with Linkin Park. We do this tour every year, and it gets bigger and bigger every time we do it. And at one point, we had Cypress Hill on the tour. And when I watched them play, they had this percussionist. His name's Eric Bobo. He's the son of Willie Bobo, who's a famous Latin jazz percussionist. And when I saw him play, I was like, man, you know what? If I ever get a chance to, we are going to get together and record some music. And so obviously when I was working on this Fort Minor project, it was the perfect excuse to get together. And people also ask, who's that singing on the choruses? A lot of the song, every song on the record, if you hear singing, I actually wrote the part. And in most cases, I wanted somebody else to sing it. But this one, when I listened to it back, I thought, you know what? This doesn't sound like anybody else singing it. It kind of just has its own thing. So I decided to leave my own voice on there. Get Me Gone is a funny song because a lot of Linkin Park fans can relate to the stories in it. I remember when we were first getting started, there was a guy at our label who, although he really wanted to understand the band, he just there were certain times that he just didn't get it, and he wanted us to have a gimmick. He wanted our DJ to wear a cowboy hat and a lab coat, for example, as a gimmick. He didn't like my rapping. He wanted us to be more straight-ahead rock band. All stuff that, just didn't make sense for us. That's not who we are. So lucky for us, things worked out as far as we put out the record after that, and it did well. That way, now we get to do what we want to do on a record. Also, there was a time when people said that the band was manufactured, and obviously that's ridiculous. We've known each other for years and years, and we make all this music. We write all this stuff ourselves. So I just wanted to address those things in a song. High Road is one of those songs that it just makes me happy. It just sounds like a good time to me. It sounds like a party. I love playing it live. When Fort Minor plays shows live, I put together a band of, there's 3 string players, 3 backup singers, and a drummer, and a DJ, and it's me and Styles of Beyond on the mic. It's just a good time, and this is one of those songs that I love to play. When I was growing up, there were groups like Public Enemy and Boogie Down Productions that would talk about more maybe political issues or social issues, just whatever was affecting them, they thought, in their community and personally. And I don't know, I feel like maybe that's not completely missing from today's hip-hop, but it's definitely something that I've never done before on a record, and I wanted to do. Especially when I thought about the fact that there's never been a song done about Japanese internment. I'm half Japanese. My family was interned during World War II. What happened is, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government basically went through a period of what we would call now racial profiling. And they took all the Japanese Americans, anybody who was of Japanese descent, and stuck them in internment camps. If you can imagine, you come home from work and the FBI is sitting there and they tell you to pack up your stuff and you're leaving today to go to a camp for the rest of the war. And you don't know how long that's going to be. It ended up being, 1 to 2 years for a lot of people. Even after that, there was a lot of racial tension going on, and everything was just very difficult for families like mine. So I wanted to make a song about that. A lot of people, when they hear about this happen, they can't even imagine this happened in the U.S., but it did. On the Linkin Park album Meteora, we did a song called From the Inside, which is a 6/8 time song. That means there's 6 counts per measure. And that's usually more of a rock thing, or it's less of a hip-hop thing. You don't really hear hip-hop artists doing 6/8 time songs. But I really liked doing it, and I wanted to do it somewhere on the Fort Minor album. Red to Black kind of came up in that way, and since it was that 6/8 time, it had me and Styles Beyond already on it. I wanted to try and get a couple more artists to just take that weird, hip-hop but non-hip-hop thing to the next level. And so I gave a couple friends of mine a call. That was Kenna and Jonah Matranga. And I just thought the three of our voices together was the weirdest thing, but it worked for the song. The battle was supposed to sound like it was at a venue. Like, people wonder, did I take that clip from an actual performance somewhere? And the answer is actually no. I engineered it to make it sound like it was from a venue. It was from a battle somewhere. The concept behind the battle was, it's not a battle like a battle rap, but this is the battle, the everyday battle of life, of what's more important than rapping, because a lot of underground MCs get all caught up in the hip hop thing, and they lose sight of real life when they're writing lyrics. The song Slip Out the Back is basically, it's just a really deep story, something I just came up with in my head. It has little elements of reality, but it's not based on one specific thing. It's kind of just weird little run-ins I've had with people and fans in the past and what they've told me. The idea, the theme of the song being that sometimes in order to be a hero, you have to appear like a coward. The bonus tracks. These are the tracks that didn't make the cut because I didn't want to have, like 21 songs or whatever on the record. But I hope everybody gets a chance to hear these, especially the song Be Somebody. Lupe Fiasco he's just the greatest guy. I can't say enough about this guy. He's technically so talented. His heart is in the right place. He's entertaining, and he killed it on this song. He writes in the same way that Jay writes, in the sense that he doesn't put anything down. He just goes in the booth and kind of thinks about things and lays them down. He'll get to, let's say a verse is 16 bars, he'll just sit there and vibe out to the music and then tell you to record, and he'll put down the first 4 bars, and then he'll stop, and then he'll vibe out on those 4, and then add another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars. So he just kind of pieces it together, and by the end, he was probably finished with the verse from beginning to end in, I'd say, less than 30 minutes. And he never puts a word down on paper. There They Go was one of those songs I just wanted to make something that was aggressive. My friend Six John, he's an artist out of LA. He's one of those guys that just ghostwrites for other people. Like, you've probably heard his verses before, but he didn't rap them. He wrote them for somebody else. And I think he offered to ghostwrite mine at some point, and he said, like, no offense, but I really would love to do it because it would be fun. And I had to tell him no, because I just don't believe in that for myself. I always want to write my own stuff. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Six, he's a great lyricist. He's a lot of fun, and he did his thing on this track. The Hard Way is another 6/8 time song that it was funny that Kenna is on both of the 6/8 time signature songs that I did for the Fort Minor album. I think he called me on that he's like, why do I have to be on all 6/8 songs? It was one of those songs that, like, every time you write a song, you've got a rough title for it. Like, if I'm standing in a room with a pencil and I'm about to start writing a song, I may call the file on the computer pencil because it's got to have a name in the computer. Well, this song, I just called it The Hard Way because it was a 6/8 time song or a 3/4 time song. So 3 The Hard Way. I thought I was just being silly. And when Kenna saw the words "The Hard Way" on the song title, he's like, "That's a great song name. We should use that." So we made it happen like that, and basically, the song it's kind of a more introspective kind of thing, which I thought would be a nice way to round out this group of bonus tracks. So that's it. That's the Fort Minor album, The Rising Tide. Before we go, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that people always ask about the album. They ask, how'd you come up with the name, or why didn't you name it just Mike Shinoda? Listening to the whole thing back, I think that the intention of this record is just something that's more, just different, not your typical hip-hop record. And I think if I wanted to go the typical route, I could have hired a bunch of big-name producers that would have given me those hit singles, and then I would have named it, Mike Shinoda and all that. But that wasn't the intention. I mean, I wasn't, this wasn't the type of thing that I went out there trying to sell a bunch of records. This is really just a musical kind of idea and a statement that I wanted to make. So in doing so, I wanted to come up with a name for the project. I called it Fort Minor because those are like kind of opposite words. Fort being more aggressive and big, minor being the opposite. As far as the album title, The Rising Tide, there's a lot of great other guests on this record, and I really felt like in the context of this record, we were all kind of tied together. So The Rising Tide is just a play on words to say this tied group of people is rising up together in the context of this album. So that's it, the Fort Minor record, The Rising Tide. You can check us out on fortminor.com or myspace.com/Fort Minor. Thank you guys very much for listening.